Today, I want to speak to you about a phase of life that most people don't talk about enough, the age between 70 and 75. We often romanticize retirement. We say, oh, now life will be peaceful, no stress, just relaxation. But many elders quietly discover something very different. They realize this is not always the easiest phase of life. In fact, for many, it becomes one of the most emotionally challenging chapters. Not because life is unfair, but because life is changing in ways they were never emotionally prepared for. Let me share with you 10 deep reasons why the age between 70 and 75 often feels like the hardest phase, along with small real life inspired stories that reflect this truth. 1. The silence after a busy life. For decades, life is filled with noise, urgency, and purpose. Morning begins with alarms, responsibilities, and expectations. Days are packed with meetings, family duties, professional goals, and endless problem solving. In that rhythm, a person feels alive because they are constantly needed. Their identity becomes deeply connected with action, contribution, and busyness. But between 70 and 75, life slowly changes its language. The noise reduces, calls become rare, work stops, friends become busy in their own worlds. Even the home, once full of movement, starts to feel unusually quiet. At first, this silence feels peaceful, like a long awaited rest. But slowly it begins to echo. The mind, still conditioned for activity, starts searching for meaning in the stillness. I once met an elderly gentleman who smiled and said, earlier I complained I had no time. Now I have all the time, but no one to share it with. That statement reflects a deep emotional truth. Silence is not just absence of sound, it becomes presence of memories, reflections, and sometimes loneliness. Yet, if embraced consciously, this silence can become sacred. It becomes an invitation to rediscover inner peace, to meet oneself without distraction, and to understand life beyond external validation or constant activity. 2. Loss of identity. One of the deepest emotional shifts between 70 and 75 is the quiet loss of identity. For decades, a person is known by their role. He is a father, a manager, a teacher, a business owner, a respected figure in society. Their name carries weight because it is attached to achievement and responsibility. But retirement gently removes those labels. Suddenly, the person who was once called Sir in meetings becomes just another face in the crowd. This shift is not only social, it is deeply psychological. I once met a retired school principal who said, when I walk into my old school, everyone respects me, but I no longer feel significant. That sentence carries emotional depth. Respect may still exist, but relevance feels reduced. The mind struggles to adjust because identity was built over decades through contribution and recognition. Now, without daily roles, the question arises, who am I beyond what I used to do? This question can feel unsettling. However, it also becomes an opportunity. It gently pushes a person to move from external identity to internal identity, from what I do to who I am. It becomes a journey from role based living to soul based understanding, where worth is no longer measured by productivity but by presence, awareness, and peace within oneself. 3. The body starts talking loudly. Between 70 and 75, the human body begins to speak more loudly than ever before. For most of life, the body quietly supports ambitions, travel, work, and endless responsibilities. It adapts, it adjusts, it tolerates. But in this stage, it becomes more honest and less forgiving. Small aches turn into daily reminders. Knees hesitate before every step. Sleep becomes lighter and sometimes broken. Energy no longer flows as freely as before. A simple walk that once felt effortless now requires awareness and care. I once heard an elderly woman say with a gentle smile, my body now reminds me of every mistake I made when I was young. That statement may sound humorous, but it carries truth. The body becomes a living record of time, habits, and choices. Yet this phase is not only about limitation, it is also about awareness. The body teaches patience, slowing down, and acceptance. It forces a person to listen more carefully to their needs. Instead of pushing endlessly, life begins to ask for balance. The body is no longer just a tool for action, it becomes a teacher of mindfulness. It reminds us that life is not only about how far we go, but also about how gently we treat the vessel that carries us through every stage of existence. 4. Friends start disappearing. One of the most emotionally difficult realities between 70 and 75 is the gradual disappearance of friends. In earlier years, life is surrounded by social circles, laughter, gatherings, and shared experiences. Friends are just a phone call away, and plans are made easily. But as time passes, those circles slowly become smaller. Some friends move to different places, some lose contact, and some are no longer present in this world. I once heard an elderly man say softly, "Every year my contact list becomes shorter, not because people left me, but because they left life itself." That statement reflects a deep sense of emotional loss. It is not just about missing people, it is about missing shared history, memories, and familiarity. The mind struggles to adjust because friendship was once a source of identity and joy. Now, silence replaces conversations. However, this stage also carries a hidden lesson. It teaches the value of presence over numbers. It encourages deeper connection with the few who remain. It also gently reminds us that relationships are temporary, but gratitude for those connections can be eternal. Even in absence, love continues in memory. The heart learns to hold people not physically, but spiritually, in the quiet space of remembrance and appreciation. 5. Children become busy with their own lives. A very natural but emotionally challenging shift between 70 and 75 is watching children become fully absorbed in their own lives. Parents spend decades raising children with love, sacrifice, and constant attention. They imagine a future where children will always remain close, always available, and emotionally dependent in the same way. But life follows its own rhythm. Children grow, build careers, move to different cities or countries, and create their own families. I once met a mother who said softly, "My son calls me every day, but I still wait for the moment when he calls without checking the clock." This reflects a subtle emotional gap. The love is present, but time and attention become structured and limited. It is not neglect, it is life progression. Yet the heart still remembers earlier closeness. The parent begins to experience a new kind of emotional space where love exists without daily presence. This stage teaches acceptance. It teaches that love does not always mean proximity. It also invites parents to rediscover themselves beyond caregiving roles. Instead of feeling left behind, they can slowly learn to stand in their own emotional completeness. Love for children remains, but expectation slowly transforms into blessing, and attachment gently evolves into understanding and prayerful support from a distance. 6. The feeling of "Am I still useful?" Between the ages of 70 and 75, one of the most silent but powerful emotional questions that arises is, "Am I still useful?" For decades, life has been defined by contribution. A person wakes up each day knowing they are needed at work, at home, in society. Their decisions matter, their presence has impact, and their actions create outcomes. But after retirement, that structure slowly dissolves. The calendar becomes empty, and responsibilities reduce significantly. In that space, usefulness feels uncertain. I once met a retired engineer who said, "Earlier, I used to solve problems of bridges. Now I struggle to solve my own boredom." That statement carries both humor and depth. It reflects a shift from external problem solving to internal adjustment. The mind struggles because identity was strongly linked to productivity. However, usefulness does not disappear, it only changes form. A person may no longer build structures, but they can still build wisdom, patience, and emotional strength in others. They may not lead teams, but they can still guide families with experience. This stage quietly teaches that value is not only in doing, but also in being. Presence itself becomes contribution. Listening becomes service. Calmness becomes influence. And wisdom becomes a quiet but powerful form of usefulness. 7. Financial anxiety returns quietly. Between 70 and 75, financial anxiety often returns in a subtle but persistent way. Even when a person has worked hard all their life and saved responsibly, new concerns begin to emerge. Medical expenses increase, inflation affects savings, and uncertainty about future needs quietly grows in the background of daily thoughts. It is not always about lack of money more often, it is about fear of unpredictability. I once heard a retired clerk say, I planned my retirement well, but I never planned for my health to demand so much. That statement reflects a common reality. The mind, which once focused on earning, now focuses on preserving. Every expense feels more significant because income has stopped. Even small financial decisions carry emotional weight. However, this stage also offers an important lesson. It teaches the value of simplicity and mindful living. It encourages reducing unnecessary desires and focusing on essential needs. It also brings awareness that true security is not only financial, but also emotional and spiritual. When acceptance grows, fear begins to reduce. Trust in past efforts and gratitude for present stability can bring peace. Financial anxiety, when understood deeply, becomes less about money and more about learning detachment from constant worry and cultivating confidence in life's natural flow and balance. 8. The emotional weight of memories. At the age between 70 and 75, memories begin to play a much larger role in daily emotional life. The present becomes quieter, but the past becomes more active. The mind often revisits earlier stages of life, childhood, career achievements, family moments, and even mistakes that were never fully resolved. These memories come not as a continuous story, but as sudden reflections. I once met an elderly man who said, At night, I don't fear death, I fear my memories don't forgive me. That sentence reveals the emotional complexity of this stage. Some memories bring warmth and gratitude, while others bring regret and unanswered questions. The mind replays conversations that could have been different, decisions that could have been better, and opportunities that were missed. This emotional replay can sometimes feel heavy. However, it also carries an opportunity for healing. This is the age where forgiveness becomes deeply important, not only forgiving others, but also forgiving oneself. Memories cannot be changed, but the way they are held can change. When seen with acceptance, memories transform from burdens into lessons. They become teachers instead of punishments. This stage gently encourages emotional closure, inner peace, and the understanding that life is not meant to be perfect, but to be experienced, learned from, and ultimately released with compassion and grace. 9. Physical dependence on others. Between 70 and 75, many individuals begin to experience a gradual shift from independence to dependence. Tasks that once felt automatic, walking long distances, carrying heavy objects, managing health routines, started requiring assistance. This transition can be emotionally challenging, especially for those who spent their entire lives being self reliant. I once met a retired businessman who said, I built companies, managed employees, and made decisions for thousands of people, but now I cannot even manage my medicine without asking someone. That statement reflects the emotional contrast between past strength and present vulnerability. Dependence is not weakness, but it is often perceived that way by the mind. Accepting help becomes difficult because it feels like loss of control. However, this stage also teaches humility in a very deep sense. It reminds a person that life is cyclical and everyone eventually receives care after giving care for years. It also opens the heart to gratitude towards children, caregivers, and even small acts of kindness from others. When resistance reduces, dependence becomes less painful and more human. It teaches that dignity is not in doing everything alone, but in accepting life as it is with grace. In this acceptance, a new form of strength emerges, emotional strength rooted in humility and trust. 10. The quiet question of mortality. Between 70 and 75, awareness of mortality becomes more present and natural. It is not necessarily fear, but a deeper recognition that life has entered its final chapters. This awareness often brings reflection rather than panic. A person begins to think more about meaning, legacy, and how life has been lived. I once heard an elderly woman say, I don't fear death, I just wonder if I lived correctly. That statement captures the essence of this stage. The focus shifts from planning the future to understanding the past and finding peace in the present. Conversations become more meaningful and small moments gain greater importance. Even ordinary activities like sitting in sunlight or speaking with loved ones feel more significant. Mortality awareness also encourages emotional clarity. People begin to value forgiveness, reconciliation, and gratitude more deeply. However, it can also bring occasional sadness if regrets remain unresolved. The key transformation in this stage is not fear of death, but acceptance of life's impermanence. When this acceptance deepens, fear reduces and peace increases. Mortality then becomes not an end to be feared, but a reminder to live gently, honestly, and fully in the remaining time. It encourages a softer way of being, where each moment is valued not for its length, but for its presence and meaning.